Reed right there with her defense team and her father as well. She was found not guilty of second-degree murder, manslaughter, and leaving the scene of the death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. She was found guilty of a single lesser charge of drunk driving and sentenced to 1-year probation. Let's bring in Ron Chapman, federal defense attorney and author of Truth and Persuasion in the Digital Revolution and host of the Wall podcast. Ron, good morning and welcome once again. A lot of emotion and reaction inside and outside the courtroom yesterday. Did this verdict surprise you as you watched the case?
I wasn't surprised by the verdict. I heard the wonderful closing argument by the defense. I thought it was fantastic. And listen, what this case really shows is that regardless of what happened on that night or in the early hours of that morning, that when the police deviate from what they should do, which is investigate without bias, collect evidence, and then determine the likely culprit, instead of doing that, it appears in this case that they jumped to conclusions, they made assumptions, they determined a suspect, as we saw from the Proctor messages, before they actually had enough evidence, and they tried to build a case later. When you see that happening, there is a recipe for acquittal here, and I think the defense did a good job proving that case. Okay,
great point, Ron. Then who is it then? Because I can listen to the internet sleuths online, what they think, but what do you think? They're going to go after the real killer?
Well, that's the hard part. I mean, we have a potentially biased police force there that did the investigation. I think that we have to get an outside entity, potentially the feds, to look into this and see what sort of corruption there was. And there's also a civil lawsuit against Karen Reed, where I think that maybe some additional information may come out related to the death. Who did it? Let me just say that innocent, not guilty does not mean innocent. Not guilty does not mean you didn't do it. Not guilty means that the prosecution did not do the right job to prove the case. Was it Karen Reed? It's very possible. However, they didn't do enough to clear the other likely potential suspects. What happened in that house? How did he get those other injuries? Those are questions that need to be answered. And if the police had come forward and told the truth about what happened in that house, we certainly would know more.
Well, we didn't hear directly from O'Keefe's family, but from friends saying, quote, "Today our hearts are with John and the entire O'Keefe family. They have suffered through so much and deserved better from our justice system." Right now, Karen Reed faces a civil suit by O'Keefe's family. What happens next there?
Well, I think in the civil suit, we have a different burden of proof. Beyond a reasonable doubt is what you heard in the criminal case. In the civil case, they just have to prove it by a preponderance of the evidence, much lower. You may recall the OJ case, not guilty in the criminal trial, guilty in the civil case, and had to pay out a substantial sum of money. That could also happen to Karen Reed. But the reality is, with the public sentiment, with the issues with the police force that we have here, I don't think that civil case gets off the ground. I imagine there will be somewhat of a settlement, but I think that we need to solve the question of who was actually responsible before proceeding with all of this. And that means let's have a real investigation for this family. They're the real victims here. They need answers and they deserve them.
You watched, Ron, both of Reed's trials from gavel to gavel. What do you think was the difference between trial number 1 and trial number 2, and what led to this acquittal, you believe?
Yeah, keys to the victory here. Number 1, I think we have a new day in the legal field. Karen Reed voraciously advocating for herself in front of the press. I think we're going to see defendants make statements now to the media a lot more. I'm going to incorporate that in my strategy. It was very successful. Trial presentation, especially the closing argument by Alan Jackson, it was tremendously helpful in the sense that they timed what he was saying with the display of the exhibits. That sort of high-tech display, fantastic. But then the other thing is, the second time around, they were able to leverage some of the holes they poked the first time around. A lot of people don't know this, but criminal defendants don't get knowledge of everything that the prosecution is going to say. So with the ability to cross-examine these witnesses and use those transcripts later, that increased their access to justice. Here's the problem. That jury didn't hang in the first trial, and we have a very different outcome. She very well could have been convicted unjustly, and then she's looked at as a murderer and the real person isn't caught. That's very problematic.
All right, this is just in your opinion, Ron. You just set it up in a previous answer talking about the dynamic between her and the Boston police. If you were advising her, would you advise her to move away or remain in that area? Because they're going to be lurking, correct?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I advise her to move away, but I know that Karen is absolutely not going to move away from anywhere. She's probably going to become some sort of public figure. I think she's relatively emboldened. I think that she's going to capitalize on this attention, probably with some justice reforms in mind. And honestly, if she's listening, I will say this: the best use of your time right now is to use the platform you have for the people that can't afford or don't have access to the type of defense that you have, so that they can get justice. That's what's really needed in our system right now.
Yeah, all of those content providers that her dad, Bill, talked about and thanked after the verdict was read. Maybe she'll take advantage of them. Ron Chapman, always great insight. We appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.